I am Dr. Surendra Singh Pokharna. I am a retired scientist from Indian Space Research Organization and currently working in the field of Science and Spirituality Research Institute in Ahmedabad. I am very grateful to Hariom WhatsApp and Space and Education Research Foundation, which have invited me to speak on this interesting topic entitled Quantum Physics, Neurophysiology and Consciousness, New Frontiers to be Explored by Young Physicists. Now, these are going to be the new areas actually, how to understand consciousness from quantum physics, neurophysiology and different perspectives. So I will try to cover some of the areas in which work is going on and some of the work which we ourselves have done at this institute, Science and Spirituality Research Institute, Ahmedabad. Now, I am dedicating this presentation to my parents who have always encouraged me to work in these interdisciplinary areas involving science and religion or science and spirituality, because they used to feel that this is needed to solve the problems of the world. And now scientists are realizing, policymakers are realizing that there is definitely a need to reconcile science with spirituality and to understand the concept of consciousness, which has been discussed in Indian culture and Indian philosophy from thousands of years. Now, I have first given the summary of the whole talk. Actually, a lot of work is going on to understand the concept of consciousness and soul through various branches of science and philosophy all over the world. And several thousand scientists are now working from different disciplines like computer science, neurophysiology, artificial intelligence, quantum physics, quantum field theory, and so many different areas, philosophy, psychology, and so on. So a lot of work is going on. For physicists, it is of interest to know how quantum physics can explain the concept of consciousness. Now, as more and more understanding of the brain is actually coming into light, an assumption that brain consists mostly of neurons and synapses and their networks, it is becoming more and more clear that to explain many phenomena involved in brain sciences, psychology, and cognition and other branches, there is a need to incorporate quantum physics in understanding these new phenomena which are found in neurophysiology, psychology, and consciousness-related topics. Now, the most important thing is that wave function, which is defined in quantum physics, as you know, it has a non-local characteristic. That is, it spreads, and that spread probably has some relation with consciousness, because consciousness also does a function of correlating or integrating some of the functions of the brain, and it also can explain the concept of holographic memory of the brain, which is now well known. So this non-local characteristic of quantum physics is going to be very useful in understanding some of the properties of brain. Then the other concept of psychology, which is known as free will. Now this free will is related with the idea that if I give you any choice to select something, then you have a choice to either say yes or no. Now this free will concept has some relation with quantum physics in the sense that quantum physics also has some kind of property which says that an electron can act as a wave or a particle. So the choice is there in that case also. So people are trying to explore this capability of quantum physics also to explain the concept of free will. Then there is another very interesting concept which has developed and which is of great interest to physicists, is this quantized space-time geometry. As you know that Einstein has given the idea of combining the space and time to have a concept of space-time geometry. Now what scientists have done is that they have tried to put quantum physics also into this. So quantum physics and space-time geometry are combined, and the discipline is called quantum gravity. And under this discipline, it has been found that there are what is known as spin forms which are existing in the nature at very fundamental level, and they are quantized form of the space-time geometry, and that can contain huge information. Now this has implication in understanding the process like reincarnation, that is life after life, and karma theory, etc. So this is a very exciting field and a lot of work is going on, so I will try to cover that also. Now, what is consciousness and what is soul? Now, consciousness is a property which differentiates living systems from non-living systems. That is, it is well known that non-living systems are, say, dead wood like thing, material, purely material entities, whereas the living systems have life. They have some kind of feeling, they have concept of, say, some kind of, say, quality or state of awareness is there, or we can say some kind of this sentience or awareness, subjectivity, experience, or some kind of feeling, or some kind of wakefulness is there. There's some kind of selfhood is there, some kind of feeling of egoism is there, for example. So these are some of the qualities or characteristics of consciousness in a very simplified way. But now consciousness is defined in a very complex way, because it contains several other properties, but we will not go into the details of them right now. Consciousness, now for example, we know that whenever surgery is carried out by doctors, then they give some kind of anesthesia like chloroform, for example, or some other chemical. Now temporary, where the consciousness go, for example. So that is a very, very important problem. It is not yet completely solved. And it has now a big challenge to scientists how to explain and understand this thing. Then, in addition to consciousness, people also talk about soul now. Now, soul is being discussed in Indian philosophy and several other philosophies from thousands of years. And this is a property that soul exists even after the death. Now, this has become a topic of interest for scientists also, and scientific community is also talking about soul. Some scientists are trying to link soul with consciousness. Some say that soul and consciousness are different properties. So in this context, I want to say that the concept of soul came into picture in philosophies to explain the concept of life after death also. So that is the concept of soul. Sorry. Now, why classical model cannot explain following attributes of consciousness? Now, here the subjective experience, that is our inner self. Now, what is the meaning of subjective experience? Subjective experience means that whatever I am thinking or you are thinking inside of you without expressing it outside, that is called subjective experience. Now, what is the subjective experience? This cannot be explained using classical model of consciousness. Then there is interesting property known as binding of spatially distributed brain activities into unitary objects. Now here an example of vision is given. For example, suppose there is a body which is moving. Then the body, for example, a car, it has a shape, it has certain color, and it has certain motion, for example. Now neurophysiologically, information about shape, color, and motion are stored in different locations of the brain. But when we see the object, a car moving, like, then we find that all the three properties are getting integrated. Now, how this integration takes place? This is a very important problem, and here only the concept of non-locality or integration comes into the picture. So quantum physics directly comes into the picture. Then there is what is known as transition from pre-conscious processing to consciousness. Now, many times we feel that many things are going on around us or inside our body which are unconscious, or we are not aware of something which is happening in front of us, but suddenly we become conscious about it. Now, from where this transition takes place from pre-conscious state to conscious state. So here now the concept of our wave function comes into the picture. We know that we talk of superposition in quantum physics. And when there is a what is known as collapse of the wave function, then the whole wave function reduces into one eigen state. So that can explain this property of moving from pre-conscious processing to consciousness state. So this is how mechanics, this quantum physics comes into the picture. Then what is known as non-computability. Non-computability and the concept of determinism and randomness. It has been studied to understand the human decision-making capacity, and Professor Penrose has done a lot of work in this. Now, as per Professor Penrose, human decision-making are neither fully deterministic nor completely random. They are not even computable. Now, that is a very, very complex situation actually. So this can be also partly explained using quantum physics because of the uncertainty principle and the collapse of the wave function. And similarly, the concept of free will, which I explained you already, this also can be explained by the contradictory properties of wave and particle and the concept of this collapse of the wave function. So these are the basic principles that this consists of photons and electrons, consist of waves as well as particles, two contradictory properties. So they have an application in understanding consciousness, as I explained you. Then all these contradictory properties in quantum physics, as you know, are explained through Schrodinger equation, which talks about a wave function which has a definite value at a space and time point. But there is a probability that an electron can be found anywhere in this wave function. That is, the wave function describes the properties of the electron or the photon, and what we find is that it only provides probability that the particle can be found here or there. So it has a non-local characteristics, or it has some kind of spread. So this is very important, and this non-local characteristics is very, very useful in explaining the concept of consciousness, which also has certain spread. Then, as I explained you already, the wave function collapses also has applications in understanding the concept of consciousness, because there also we suddenly move or switch over from a unconscious state to a conscious state. So again, quantum physics is able to explain this thing, and similarly, this free will is also explainable using the concept of quantum physics. Now, there are other things also. There are other properties also which can be explained only using quantum physics. For example, the brain has holographic memory. That is, if you cut, a part of the brain, then the memory is not localized. Memory is distributed throughout the brain. Therefore, because it is so, because of what is known as the holographic model of consciousness, and it is explainable using this what we know as the interference pattern generated from, say, two laser beams. So that analogy exists here in this case also. Now that is again explainable using quantum physics. Then we have the concept of Bose-Einstein condensation in brain and consciousness. Now, as you know that when we go for a state of meditation, then our whole thought processes condenses. That is, thoughts just disappear. Now, this is equivalent to what we call is the Bose-Einstein condensation in quantum physics. So there is an application of that also. Then this is another important thing. In quantum physics, we talk about retarded and advanced potentials. Now, these retarded potentials are well known, and they are in classical physics also. But advanced potentials is a new concept in quantum physics, and it implies that information can flow in negative time direction. That is from future to present, and is possible in biological system. Now, it is becoming very clear that biological system can have a possibility in which information can flow in the negative time direction. Mathematically, it is allowed, but physically, it is found only in biological system. There are evidences for this, and that property can explain what we call as telepathy. So telepathy can be explained, it has some connection with advanced potential. Now, another scientific finding is that quantum mechanics is involved in decision making in psychology. We all know that when we take decision in the psychological domain, then they follow some kind of probability. Now, it has been found that this probability is not the classical probability, but it follows quantum probability. Therefore, it involves some kind of interference terms also. So again, quantum physics is involved in this aspect of consciousness. Then another example is of this quantum tunneling of neurotransmitter. Now, as you know that in the brain, the two neurons are interconnected through synapses. Now, these synapses, there is a flow of either some kind of electrons or some kind of chemicals. And this flow across what is known as these junctions. These are the junctions, for example. So here, for example, this is enlarged here into this form, and this part is enlarged into this form. And these junctions, for example, how the particles move across these junctions here or here. Now, it has been found that they can be explained only using quantum physics because of the spread in the wave function, those things. It is possible to explain them, otherwise it was not possible. So quantum physics plays an important role here in this case also. Then there is another very interesting application of this. You know that this is our brain. I will not go into the details, and this is a picture of a neuron. And here you can see that it is a simplified picture of the neuron. And here you can see this is the center of this neuron, and there are black lines here. Now these black lines here are called microtubules. And if we enlarge these microtubules, then we get some kind of cylindrical structure. And in this cylindrical structure, if we further expand and try to understand it, then it has this type of structure. So there are about 13 rods in this cylinder. So this is very exciting and very interesting results indeed, that neuron also consists of these microtubules, which further consist of these rods, and each rod has some further smaller components which are known as tubulins. So these are this tubulin. So this thing is called tubulin, and this tubulin act as a quantum mechanical system. So this is a very exciting thing. So quantum physics is directly coming into picture to explain the concept of consciousness or how it acts as a quantum computer. We know that brain acts as a computer also. So here this can explain that it is not only acting as a computer, but it is acting as a quantum computer probably, and quantum computer at room temperature. Now this is going to be a very exciting field for further researches, and several scientists are working in this area. There is a need to explore this frontier, new frontiers by Indian physicists and you students who are fairly young from the undergraduate level or graduate level. So these are the new frontiers where work should be done. Then I just come to another topic which I mentioned about this space-time gravity, that is, quantum gravity and quantized space-time geometry. So this is some structure of something very approximate structure of what is known as spin form, and this is there at Planck level, that is 10 to the power minus 35 centimeter and 10 to the power minus 43 second. So extremely small. And this spin form can contain information. That is just like a spin state we have in case of electron or photon. So actually in the case of this electron, we have spin state, so it can take value plus half or minus half. So information can be stored. Similarly in photon there is a polarization. So information can be stored. Similarly in this spin form at this particular level can have huge information. And this information has some access to the brain. So this is very interesting work done by Professor Penrose and Professor Hambrock. Now they are telling that all activities which we are doing every day, for example, is getting stored in this spin form. Now it is some kind of, I would say, speculation cum phenomenological model or something like that, but it will have huge consequences. So this can therefore explain the concept of consciousness or soul, what we call as soul. So each person has its own space-time geometry, quantized space-time geometry. So I have, for example, my own space-time geometry, which is quantized, and whatever I am speaking, for example, in front of you, that information is getting stored in this. Now, suppose a person dies, then this body will disappear, this brain will disappear, but its space-time geometry will remain. And that information may be used in determining his next birth, for example. So this is something very great concept which is coming up. And there are similar such concepts which are being actually coming up. And some of them are postulated, and a lot of theoretical studies are going on. So we have to examine these things now very thoroughly and very rigorously, but with an open mind. Now, this is a work which we have done actually, that what is the evidence of the soul and consciousness and all these things. Now, I will take you 100 years back in the history, and you must have heard name of this Annie Besant, who was president of this Theosophical Society, and she was a chemistry graduate. Now, she learned about what is known as Anima Siddhi in India, and the property of clairvoyance, which is developed by this. So she and her colleague, Mr. Leadbeater, and another Mr. C. Jinraj Das, they tried to use this concept of clairvoyance, which is a property of consciousness or soul, to study the structure of atoms. About 100 years ago, 92 elements were known actually, from hydrogen up to uranium. So they tried to study the structure of all these atoms, and those details are extensively available now. Now, what we have examined is that, for example, in the case of hydrogen atom, what they have seen is that this is the hydrogen atom as we see at present through modern science, which consists of a proton at the center and an electron moving around it. But what she has seen the hydrogen atom in this form. So you can see that there are three spheres here, three big spheres are here forming a triangle, and another three spheres which are forming another triangle. So something like that. So there are 6 big spheres. Now inside each of these 6 big spheres, they have seen 3 small spheres. And so totally there are 18 small spheres which they have seen in the hydrogen atom. Now, it was become a very big mystery and big secret that how to explain these 18 things. Now, there was one English physicist who was a particle physicist who did PhD from California Institute of Technology. His name was Stephen Phillips. He examined this work thoroughly, and he tried to link it with the structure of quarks. But we have used a different model of Professor Nepe and Edward Close, and we have found that there is a very strong evidence that what we are calling this small sphere, they have called them as Anu. So they have called them as Anu, and they have seen through this highly advanced clairvoyant faculty. So these 18 are appearing to be parts of subquarks, and we have made an estimation assuming that each quark has rest mass, that is proton, for example, consists of top quark and down quark, that is 2 top quark and 1 down quark. And if we divide the rest mass of the top quark with the rest mass of the electron, then and make it integer, then we get a number 4 for top quark, and we get a number 9 for down quark. So for 2 up quark, it will be 8, and 9, if you combine, it will be 17. And if you add this electron also, then it will become 18. So when we talk of the lepton-hadron model, joint model, then or to call it supersymmetry, then this 18 can be explained. It assumed it's a very strong evidence that these 18 represent some kind of subquark or structure smaller than quark. Now, how it is possible? Many scientists will just laugh at this, that what nonsense it is. But we have examined it very thoroughly, and we have studied all the 92 elements and their structure. And then we try to find out the relation between the number of anus which they have seen and the number of subquarks which we have computed using the current model of quarks. And we have found a wonderful straight line between the two numbers, that is the number of anus for the 92 elements and the number of these quantum units. So this is very, very exciting discovery indeed, and we have made a presentation. We have published it also. It was presented in Science Congress also last year. So these are going to be the new area, new frontiers of knowledge which we must examine. So there are challenges and opportunities for young Indian physicists. The problem of consciousness and soul will be one of the greatest problems of science in the 21st century. Now there is huge scope for Indian physicists to work upon them, because in our culture and in our society still we have hundreds of such mysterious examples like those of Annie Besant and others, and siddhis and those things. So they must be examined now with their very open mind, because many new avenues of thought, many new ideas, many new concepts may come up because of these studies, if we do these studies. And I want to tell you that the future lies in the multidisciplinary researches, not in the individual, this narrow domains. We should now examine of taking the physics to other areas of nature. And some of the references which we have used, I just want to give here. Annie Besant and her colleagues, they have written this book in 1908. It was modified and now it is published in 2007. It is available from Madras also. It contains details of all the structure of all the 92 elements and many other molecules which they have seen through clairvoyance. This is the paper by an Italian scientist. It describes about 10-12 models where quantum physics is being used to explain the concept of consciousness. Now, this is the experiment by S Pokharna, which shows that there is a very strong correlation at very fundamental level. That is, everything is interconnected. So this is, and this experiment, this EPR paradox has been resolved. So this is again, very useful in understanding the concept of consciousness. Then this book on transcendental physics, it talks about how to go deeper than the current physics and how to include consciousness into physics. This talks about this book. It's a very interesting and exciting book. Young students must read it. This is the paper about Hemroff, who talks of the final structure of neurons like microtubules and tubulins which follow quantum physics. Then this is the paper which we have published, and extensively, it is about a 65 pages long paper, and we have given extensive details about how the quark and subquarks were probably seen through clairvoyance by Annie Besant and the team. Extensive details are available in this paper. And this paper, I have talked about this quantum reality and the concept of Shunya, which is discussed in Indian philosophy in a very detailed way. And this is the paper which we presented in the Science Congress. So these are some of the details. Now, my only urge to you young students and young physicists is that these are going to be the new areas. New physics may come up actually from this. And this work of Nepe and Close, he's talking of a new mathematics, for example, which is known as calculus of distinction. I invite you to go through these things. It's a big challenge and big opportunities are there. So thank you very much again to SERF and Vatsa for inviting me to make this presentation.